They say the deepest cuts come from those closest to you. I learned that lesson the hard way. It was just after 3 in the morning on a Wednesday when I opened an email that ripped away 7 years of my life with a single, cold sentence. We appreciate your contributions, but we've decided to bring in someone with broader experience. Please collect your belongings by Friday. No meeting, no call, not even my name in the subject line. Just that. I sat there in silence, the glow of my laptop the only light in the office. Yes, I was still at work, naturally. I was finishing up a big system check. We were scrambling to impress potential investors. My boss, David Blackwood, had left hours ago, like usual, often telling me to lock up on his way out. My first feeling wasn't anger. It was confusion. Then came a familiar chill, like when my mother left us without a word, just a note on the kitchen counter saying, "Don't wait up." I read the email again. Then I smiled, not because it was funny, but because it suddenly made everything clear. I'd seen this coming. 7 years ago, we started Summit Solutions with nothing but a shared online document and a presentation that got laughed out of over a dozen rooms. We worked from David's basement. We survived on cheap food and cold coffee. And we told each other we were going to change the world. And maybe for a little while we did. We built a product that completely changed the shipping industry. A smart system that could predict problems and save companies millions. And when that $15 million investment came through last fall, David stood on stage in a new suit and said, "This company is built on teamwork." Teamwork? Not me. Not the complex system I designed. Not the 2,500 hours I spent fixing bugs in our core engine while he was off networking at fancy events down south. And now I was being thrown out, replaced by someone with more experience. The email didn't give a name, but I knew exactly who it was. Mark, a smooth-talking executive from a rival company who tried to hire me at a conference once. I said no. David, it seemed, said yes. I closed my laptop gently. No slamming, no crying. I wasn't the type to make a scene. I was the type to make a plan. And I had one ready. Because while David had been busy collecting praise and chasing investors, I had been quietly copying everything. Not out of spite, but just out of habit. I kept detailed records of every line of code, every change to the system, every big decision, marked with my initials and the date. I had built the fundamental structure of our product not using company resources, but on my own computer in my apartment before Summit Solutions even existed. And I had the proof. I walked through the dark office, past desks I'd put together myself, chairs I'd ordered, whiteboards covered in my handwriting. The fridge still had that bottle of sparkling wine I bought to celebrate our funding, untouched. David had promised we'd open it together when the contracts were signed. He never did. As I left, I paused at the door and looked back one last time. Not with regret, but with determination. They think I'll just disappear, I thought. On Friday morning, I showed up as the email instructed. I collected my things, a small notebook, a photo of my brother and me from when we were kids, and a small plant David gave me for my birthday 3 years ago. I left the plant on his desk. Nobody said anything. A few people avoided looking at me. One of the newer staff members whispered, "You didn't deserve this." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I walked out of the building without looking back. That afternoon, I sent David one short email. Best of luck. He didn't reply. He wouldn't. He thought it was finished. It wasn't. Because what David didn't know, couldn't have known, was that about a month earlier, I'd been contacted by a senior partner at an investment firm who said, "We're very impressed with your technology, but we're not convinced about David." And now David was about to find out what it truly meant to lose the person who built the system holding his company together. The first desperate call would come in exactly 110 days. And when it did, David's voice would crack just enough for me to hear the panic. 4 days after the email, I slept in for the first time in months. No work pings. Number 4 a.m. alerts about the system being overloaded. No urgent requests sent late at night. Just quiet. A heavy, strange quiet. At first, I didn't know what to do with it. I wandered around my apartment like a ghost, opening drawers, closing them, sitting, standing. I'd been running on pure adrenaline for 7 years straight, and now the stillness felt wrong. But by the end of the week, I remembered something I hadn't felt in a long time: clear thinking. I opened the folders on my personal computer. There it was. The very beginning of Summit Solutions product. The first version of the data engine, written in Python on my old laptop in my small apartment, long before David even knew what predictive logistics meant. I scrolled through dates, saved changes, different versions, all from before the company was officially formed. All under my name. This isn't about revenge, I reminded myself. This is proof. David had always been good at charming people. Too good. Investors loved him because he could sell anything with a confident smile. But charm doesn't build complex systems. Charm doesn't fix a never-ending loop error at 4 a.m. when your hands are shaking from too much coffee and not enough sleep. That was me, every single time. He once called me his secret weapon. I should have paid more attention to that phrase. By the second week, the online posts started appearing. David, all smiles and generic statements, announcing Summit Solutions' new direction and bringing in Mark as the new head of technology. No mention of me, no goodbye, not even a polite tag. Mark's post said something like, "Excited to bring my large-scale experience to help take Summit Solutions to the next level." I actually laughed out loud. Large-scale experience? He'd spent the last 5 years bouncing between consulting jobs, leaving behind unfinished projects and huge bills. The guy couldn't design a simple structure if his life depended on it. I closed the social media page and checked my emails. Nothing from David, of course. But there was a short note from Chloe, one of our back-end engineers who often stayed late to help me test new releases. Just heard what happened. I'm so sorry. It's not the same without you. Mark doesn't understand half of how things work. They're patching stuff constantly. Just wanted you to know we miss you. I replied with a single line, "Thanks for letting me know. Keep your head down and keep records." Week 3 was when things really started going wrong for them. Someone from Horizon Capital, a rival investment firm, got in touch. "We heard about your leaving. Would you be open to discussing some new projects? Also, and we hope you don't mind us asking, one of our tech people noticed that Summit Solutions product has slowed down significantly since last month. We thought you might know why." I didn't answer that last part. Not yet. Instead, I set up a meeting. The next day, I sat across from 3 partners in a modern meeting room in downtown Metro City. I wore the same jacket I'd worn to our big funding presentation. Only this time, I wasn't helping build someone else's dream. I was seeing what mine could look like. They asked about Summit Solutions. I gave them the simple version. Different ideas about the future, time for something new, no hard feelings. But when they asked more questions, I showed them the early versions of my code. Their faces changed. "You built this before the company even existed?" one asked. I nodded. "In my apartment, nights and weekends. I brought it to the company when David had the initial idea." They looked at each other. "And your employment contract? Did it have specific rules about giving up ownership?" I had a lawyer look at it. It had the standard clause, but the main system was created before I signed anything, and I can prove it. One of the partners leaned back and smiled. "Well, then, Ms. Adams, we think you have something very valuable." By the end of the meeting, I didn't have a new company. Not yet. But I had options power. And for the first time in months, maybe years, I felt like the ground under my feet was mine again. That night, I opened a folder on my computer called Emergency. Inside were files I'd put together months before. Quietly, carefully. They weren't meant to cause trouble. They were my safety net. Detailed notes, diagrams of the system, plans for security, records of how different parts connected. All signed and dated. They showed 2 things. 1, that I had built the heart of Summit Solutions. 2, that without me, they were on borrowed time. And I knew that time was running out fast. 3 weeks later, exactly 110 days since that email, David Blackwood's name popped up on my phone. I didn't answer. I watched it ring until it stopped. Then I smiled, because I knew this was just the start. The first call was followed by a second and a third. All from David. I ignored everyone. It wasn't about being petty. It was a strategy. I wanted him to feel the pressure. To sit in the mess he'd made, fully knowing that the only person who could help had already walked out the door and wasn't rushing back. Then came the email. Subject: urgent. Need your help. I opened it, more curious than anything else. Sarah, I realize things ended abruptly, and I regret how I handled it. Mark is having some difficulty making the system stable for our next version. The team mentioned you might have kept some notes or documents that could be useful. Would you be open to a quick chat? We would compensate you for your time, of course. Compensate me for my own work, I thought. He still didn't get it. I didn't reply, but I started watching. Summit Solutions' public social media page was filling up with complaints. People couldn't log in, data wasn't updating, whole sections of the platform were offline during busy hours. Users were using hashtags like #SummitStruggles and #DataDown. The cracks were plain for everyone to see. Then Chloe messaged me again. This time not email, but on a secure app. Hey, just between us. Mark tried to make some changes to your original code and messed up the whole backend system. He didn't understand how the layers you built to check data worked, so he just went around them. Now nothing is lining up right, and client reports are a disaster. David is losing it. I stared at her message for a while, then finally typed, "Thanks for keeping me informed. Stay safe. Don't get caught in the crossfire," because I knew what was coming next. Sure enough, 2 days later, a message arrived from the head of legal at Summit Solutions. It was a vague request asking me to explain who owns certain parts of the product's technical setup. Emily, my lawyer, spotted it before I even saw it. We met that afternoon. "I think they're getting ready for a legal move," she said, looking through printed copies of my old code notes, work messages, and plans for the system structure. "But they're not being smart about it. They're trying to get you to agree to settle quietly before they admit how bad the situation is." "And if I don't respond?" I asked. "They'll push harder. But that's not a bad thing, because you're ready, Sarah. You've kept records of everything. And if they try to use your system without a proper license or agreement, that's stealing intellectual property. Simple as that." I leaned back in the chair and breathed out slowly. It was finally happening. I remembered all those late nights David brushed off my warnings. Every time he said, "Let's not make things too complicated, Sarah," when I suggested adding safeguards. Every call with investors where he'd say, "We're a product-focused company," while taking credit for code he couldn't even understand. He had bet everything on being charming, and now it was time to pay up. The next day, I got another email. This one from Mark. "Hi, Sarah. Hope you're well. I'm reaching out to see if you could clarify how the parts that handle user logins connect with the backend. We've hit a few bumps, and I want to make sure we're on the same page. Let me know if we can hop on a quick call. Happy to pay for your time." I nearly laughed. Mark, the supposed expert, was practically begging for help. The same guy who once told a group that backend tech wasn't that hard if you just understood the business side of things was now completely lost trying to figure out my code. But what really got me? Happy to pay for your time. 7 years. No real credit, no proper departure. But now they wanted to pay me to explain a system I had warned them was never designed to be just handed over. I didn't reply, not to him. Instead, I asked Emily to prepare a formal letter. We wrote a legal notice clearly stating my original ownership of the main system design and the smart prediction engine, proof that parts of the code were created before I was even hired, the lack of any clear written agreement transferring ownership beyond what was in my job contract, and a demand that they stop using the system without a proper licensing deal. The letter finished with a simple line: "We are willing to have a serious discussion if your client is ready to acknowledge the rightful ownership of the unique systems developed by Ms. Adams." We sent it and waited. That weekend, Summit Solutions' website completely crashed for 9 hours. Several major clients publicly announced they were looking at other companies. And the final blow, an article in TechWatch titled "The Summit Solutions Fall: When Startups Ignore the Mind Behind the Tech." They'd interviewed anonymous people who still worked there. They quoted messages. They only mentioned my name as the former lead engineer who chose not to comment. But it was clear the industry was starting to understand. David's phone didn't stop ringing that week, but mine was the one they really needed to answer. And I wasn't done yet. By the start of the 4th week, the quiet had changed. It wasn't silent anymore. It was a low, urgent buzz, impossible to ignore. Like the sound of a machine about to break under too much strain. My legal letter demanding they stop using my work had landed like a warning shot. I hadn't expected an immediate answer, but I knew one would come eventually. It arrived as an invitation on my calendar. Subject: Board Meeting, Strategic Review. Sender: Eleanor Vance, Board Member, Summit Solutions. Location: a private meeting room at an investor group's office. Time: Friday at 10 a.m. Note: confidential. Your lawyer is welcome. They weren't calling to scare me anymore. This was different. Do we accept? I asked Emily that evening, sitting across from her in her office with a view of downtown. She didn't hesitate. Absolutely, but only on our terms. They're not being polite, Sarah. They're inviting you because they're losing control, and they know you have the key. That night, I didn't get much sleep. Not because I was worried, but because I was ready. For years, I'd been the background voice, the one who built the engine but never got to steer. David had been the public face, the talker, the deal-maker. But now, the investors were looking past the shiny outside and seeing the problems underneath, and they were coming to find me. The room was just as I expected. Too cold, too modern, and filled with faces trying hard not to show anything. Four board members sat on one side, with their assistant nearby. Eleanor Vance gave me a polite nod. She had been one of the first small investors, smart, sharp, and from what I'd heard, more and more doubtful about David's leadership. David, of course, was there too. His usual confident smirk had turned into something fragile. He didn't stand up when I came in, just nodded and mumbled. Sarah. Emily greeted everyone smoothly, put her bag on the table, and took out one single folder, the one that held everything. Eleanor started. Thank you for coming, Ms. Adams. I know this has been a difficult situation, but we felt it was important to speak directly before anything else happens. I nodded. Understood. Another board member, a tall man with thin glasses, cut in. Let's not waste time. The system structure Ms. Adams developed is essential to Summit Solutions. Our understanding is that parts of it were created before her employment and might not have been officially transferred. David cleared his throat. I don't agree with how you're describing it. We built this company together. Everything created during her time here belongs to Summit Solutions. Emily slid the folder forward. We expected that argument. Inside, you'll find dates, records of code changes, proof from her personal computer, and dated pictures of Ms. Adams's first working version. All from weeks, in some cases months, before any contract was signed. Also, there are messages between Mr. Blackwood and Ms. Adams where he acknowledges her earlier work. Eleanor quickly looked through the pages, her eyes narrowing as she read a highlighted conversation. She looked up at David. Did you know this wasn't formally transferred? David's jaw tightened. I assumed. Eleanor cut him off sharply. You assumed. The room was quiet. I didn't look smug. I didn't need to. Emily leaned forward. We're not here to bring down Summit Solutions. Ms. Adams believes in the product she helped build, but she won't let her work be wrongly presented or misused. We're prepared to discuss a licensing agreement and, more importantly, correct the story. Another board member looked at me. What are you asking for, Ms. Adams? My voice was steady calm. Public acknowledgement, licensing fees, and a public correction. I want it made clear that the core foundation of the system was my creation, not just a vague team effort or something someone else thought of later. And if we agree? Eleanor asked. Then you get what you need, the documentation, support, and the chance to fix the platform before more clients leave. And if we don't? I didn't smile. I just met her eyes. Then I file a lawsuit for stealing intellectual property and go public with everything. And I think you know what that would do to a $15 million company value. Eleanor leaned back in her chair and let out a slow breath. Understood. David suddenly stood up. This is blackmail. No, I said quietly. This is making someone accountable. Something you never thought would happen to you. He looked around the table, hoping someone would support him. No one did. As Emily and I walked out of the room, she leaned towards me and whispered, You just completely turned the tables. I didn't reply. But deep down, I knew this wasn't just about getting back what was mine. It was about making sure my story was told correctly before someone else erased me from it completely. And they were about to learn just how much power they had given away. That boardroom meeting had changed things, not just for them, but for me. For the first time, I wasn't just defending what I'd built. I was claiming it, taking it back. The morning after the meeting, Eleanor Vance called me directly. No assistant, no calendar invite, just her voice calm but with a clear sense of urgency. "Sarah," she said, "we went over everything again last night. The proof is undeniable. Frankly, we're amazed it took this long to become clear." "I'm not," I replied. She sighed. "Fair enough. The board met again this morning. David doesn't know yet, but we've scheduled a vote for early next week to decide on a change in leadership." I paused. "Are you saying they're letting him go?" "I'm saying," Eleanor said carefully, "that some leaders build and some just benefit. And we've decided it's time to stop mixing up the two." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Before she hung up, she added, "We'll be in touch soon. And Sarah, thank you for finally making us see the truth." That weekend, I walked by the riverfront, something I hadn't done in years. Not since the first month of Summit Solutions, when David and I would take breaks from coding by watching the boats and dreaming about getting bought out by a bigger company. Back then, we hadn't built a company, just hopes. Somewhere along the way, I kept building, while he started selling an illusion. The sky was clear, but trouble was brewing. Not in the clouds, but in the inboxes of everyone still working at Summit Solutions. By Monday, Emily had finished the details of the licensing agreement. They were fair, even generous. I didn't want revenge. I wanted to be recognized and to be sure my work could never be used again without my permission. Simple, legal, binding. We sent the proposal to the board at 9 a.m. At 11:45 a.m., David called me for the first time in weeks. This time I answered. "Sarah," he began, that fake charm already wearing thin. "I think we've let things get out of hand. There's no need for all this bad feeling." "It's not bad feeling," I said evenly. "It's order and structure, something you never valued enough." "I didn't mean for things to end the way they did," he said, changing his tone. "But you have to understand, investors expect leaders to make tough choices." Bringing in Mark seemed like the right move at the time. I let the silence hang just long enough to make him uncomfortable. Then I said, "You fired me by email." He let out a breath. "That was a mistake." "No," I replied. "It was a decision, and now you're seeing what happens because of that decision." There was a pause. Then he said, "They're voting, aren't they?" I didn't confirm it. I didn't need to. The silence was confirmation enough. "You're replacing me." I leaned back in my chair. "You replaced me first." Another long silence. "I never thought you'd do this," he finally said. "I know," I said. "That was your biggest mistake." On Wednesday morning, the board vote was finalized. David was out, officially removed as the CEO by everyone on the board. Eleanor called me herself. "The board would like to offer you the head of tech role, with a better ownership stake, control over all technical hiring, and full public acknowledgement for your work. We've also approved the licensing agreement. You'll get a portion of all money earned from the smart prediction system and data platform you created." It wasn't just a job offer. It felt like justice. "I'll need some time to think about it," I said. And for the first time, I truly meant it, because now I had choices. Not just with Summit Solutions, but elsewhere. 3 different companies had contacted me over the last month. 2 were new startups looking for someone to build the tech side with them. The third was a big international company offering a high 6-figure package to lead a new part of their research lab. 7 years ago, I would have taken far less just to be noticed. But now I was in charge. That afternoon, TechWatch published a follow-up article, "The Woman Behind the Code: How Sarah Adams Rescued a Struggling Startup She Helped Build." They had quotes from board members, even Chloe. No mention of David except talking about the past. No mention of Mark at all. Just one clear story. The real architect had come back, not as a rescuer, but as the rightful leader. I closed my laptop and looked out the window. The company was getting back on its feet. The truth was out. The power balance had completely flipped. And for the first time in 7 years, I wasn't waiting for someone else to tell my story. I was writing it myself. 4 months after the vote, I stood in the Summit Solutions main room, looking out at a mix of familiar and new faces. Engineers, analysts, operations staff, new hires. Some had been there from the start. Others were brought in during the chaos. All of them had questions. All of them were watching me now. I took a deep breath. Not because I was nervous. I wasn't. I felt solid clear. And this time, I wasn't here to fix someone else's mess. I was here to lead. A lot has changed, I began. Some of it quickly, some of it should have happened a long time ago. But if there's one thing I want you to remember today, it's this. The systems we build aren't just code in computers. They're built on people, on a shared vision, on trust. And if we lose that, if we give up those things just to chase growth or hide problems, we lose everything. A silence followed. The kind that happens when people are truly listening. I continued. This company began with an idea, but it survived because of hard work. Often, work that wasn't seen from people who don't always get credit. I know that feeling. Many of you do. So from now on, we are changing how we recognize who contributes, starting with being open and honest, and ending with sharing our success. Scattered clapping grew into something louder, more real. For once, I wasn't just in the background. After the announcement, Eleanor came up to me backstage. Her look was different now. Not just polite, but genuinely warm. We've had several clients reach out, she said. They're impressed by how stable things are, but more than that, they're impressed by the change in leadership. You've brought back their confidence. Stability starts from the ground up, I said. And the foundation was always strong. It was just hidden under flashy marketing and ego. Eleanor chuckled softly. Well, the ego walked out the door with David. I didn't ask about him. I already knew. He had tried to start a new company a few weeks earlier, but the moment potential investors heard what had gone down at Summit Solutions, the lawsuits that were almost filed, the article in Tech Watch, him being removed by the board, the money disappeared. He had burned too many bridges. The last I heard, Mark had left quietly. No press release, no post online, just gone. And me? I had choices to make. The board had confirmed my head of tech position, but they gave me total freedom. I could consult, lead, or leave on my own terms. The licensing agreement kept bringing in money, and I had ownership again, this time clearly written down and impossible to argue with. Chloe had been moved up to engineering manager. She was now in charge of the back-end team, and her first action was to start a program to help younger developers learn. I smiled when I heard that. One morning about a month later, I received an email. No subject, no sender I knew. I opened it carefully. Sarah, I owe you an apology. I should have seen your value before it was too late. Honestly, I was afraid you would outshine me. And you did. You built the core. You kept it together. I didn't realize that until everything fell apart without you. I hope someday you can believe that I truly feel bad about what I did. David. I stared at the words for a while. Not with anger, not even feeling victorious, just a sense of calm. He was right. And in a way, I was thankful. Not for the betrayal, but for the clarity it brought me. I didn't reply. Some apologies are meant to be read, not answered. That weekend, I visited the same small cafe where I used to go during the early days of Summit Solutions. Back when all I had was a laptop, an idea, and a dream nobody believed in but me. I brought my notebook this time, not the computer kind, the real one. Paper, a pen, the edges filled with tiny notes. And I started sketching something new. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Because now I wasn't building to prove something to someone else. I was building for me. And as the sun set behind the metro city skyline, I realized that what I had fought for all these months wasn't just recognition. It was control over my time, my talent, my own story. Because the impact you leave isn't the company name stamped on something. It's the values you build into it. And no one, not even the boss who tried to erase me, could take that away.